Welcome, adventurers, to the last video of 2023 for Rebel Then King. Based on the results of the last poll, thank you to everyone who voted, we are going to go over how I got into Pathfinder 2nd Edition and the origin stories of this channel. But I'm not just going to make it about me. I am, of course, going to talk about how I learned, what I learned along the way, the channels and the tools that I used, and try to make this about what you could use if you were to set out to learn the system, if you were interested in it, and hopefully make this video a bit of a how to start in Pathfinder guide. First of all, though, I do want to say that, yes, that is a drum set behind me. It's a busy time of the year and I have to practice, and I didn't have time to tear it down and set it back up in between filming, so it's just going to stay there. Hopefully it's not too distracting. I can't hear it resonating too much, so hopefully it doesn't get picked up in the audio. Sometimes drums are really loud even when they're not being played. I also want to say, if you haven't done so yet, please check out my holiday poem video. I made a 'Twas the Night Before Christmas poem about the Pathfinder 2e remaster. It's in a different setting, a different style of video than I normally do on this channel. I'm very proud of it, and it would mean a lot if you went to check that out. And then finally, I've never actually done this before, but please like, comment, and subscribe on this content. This is the end of my first year of building content. I've seen a lot of good community support so far, and every like, every sub really does help, so please help me out as much as you can. And with all that said, let's dive in. So when did I start playing Pathfinder 2nd Edition? Did I have previous experience? Well, to answer that second question, no, I had never actually played D&D or Pathfinder 1st Edition or anything like that. Played nerdy games in the past, but never anything in the D20 realm. But about halfway through the year in 2020, in the pandemic, a good friend reached out to me and asked me if I was looking for a new hobby of some sorts, and I said, sure. And he sent me some Pathfinder material, and he set up a campaign for us. So what I did is I read through some of the rulebook, I checked out Archives of Nethys, used Path Builder to end up selecting an alchemist character somehow. My first character was an alchemist gnome. And yeah, we started playing in October of that year. And in that group, I do believe everyone was a true beginner like I was, except for our GM, who I think had played 1st edition earlier. So that was really nice, and that is something I would recommend, is sort of all learning together. And it was interesting because at first, almost everybody sort of played the same. And this is something I find to be true even if you are experienced players, because at lower levels, we started at level 1, you don't have that many spell slots. You don't have that many feats yet. So you kind of use your special abilities earlier in the day, and then eventually everyone is just using a dagger and a sling, and it was kind of fun that way. But eventually I did start picking up on sort of the fundamental class differences between the characters. Even though I wasn't playing as a caster, I picked up on, there are some spells you can cast multiple times and spells that you can only cast one time per day, learning spell slots versus cantrips, for example. Also started picking up on some of the martial abilities. We had a ranger, a rogue, and a barbarian in our group, so you kind of saw the differences between those. And then got a little bit into combat and tactics, basic stuff, flanking, delaying your turn, buffing using mutagens, debuffing. My gnome character would use some intimidation, and then also planning using like recall knowledge. And for this kind of early stage of gameplay, of sort of all figuring things out, I really recommend the YouTube channel How It's Played. Lots of 3 to 5 minute videos on one specific rule, one specific feat or item. It is really the go-to source of, some of those things are debatable in the rulebook. You could have half your team read it one way and the other half read the other way, and How It's Played does a really good job of clearing things up. So I leaned on that channel quite a lot in the earlier stages. But eventually that every other week cadence wasn't really enough to scratch the overall itch. I was thinking about the game a lot and wanted to stay active, so I actually started theory crafting a lot during this time. I found this was a really good way to learn about the other classes and ancestries and things like that. It helps me out personally to have a goal when learning something and not just learning about it. So it's not very easy for me to sit down and say, I'm going to read about the witch because that's what I'm going to do. Rather, I do find it engaging and exciting to say, I want to build a witch, and then that gets me reading about all of the witch abilities, all their feats, the different way the subclasses work, and that's sort of that goal that keeps me interested in the learning. So this is a lesson I would have for you if you are starting out. I know sometimes theorycraft can be looked down upon just a little bit because you're sort of working in isolation, I guess, but I do think it is helpful. First of all, it will give you practice at building a character, which is kind of overwhelming and intimidating at first. You think about, what are all the steps I have to do? What are all the things I have to select in order to be done with my character at level 1? Well, if you theorycraft a bunch and you practice that, it just becomes automatic and you can kind of roll out a new character in just a matter of minutes. You will also be exposed to a lot of different types of abilities, of magic and martial and alchemical abilities in the game. You're going to learn about the spell lists. You're going to learn about like weapons and armor. And overall, you're just going to get a sense of what's possible. And when it comes to which tool to use for theory crafting, I really recommend Path Builder. I did have to start by using an emulator on my Mac because it was Android only at the time, but now there's a web version, and I just highly recommend that. Pay the $5.99 or whatever it is. It is just the best. And then usually what I do is I start with either a class concept, like I want to build a sorcerer, or ancestry concept, like I want to build a halfling, or maybe a playstyle concept, like I want to build a ranged damage dealer. Something I don't personally do, but I do know that other people like to do is I want to build, and then you pick a character that you like from another franchise, and then you try to rebuild that in the Pathfinder system. So not something I personally do, but it does work out for some people. Now, when it comes to the channels to and other resources to look at for this is where I find there is the most content. There are a lot of channels out there that focus on class or archetype or even ancestry background kind of things. So I would look into Crunch McDabbles, which is hilarious and goes really deep on a specific build in like a 20-minute video, Collective Arcana, the Local Disaster Tour Guide, Bad Luck Gamer, and Nonat. All of these are going to have pretty deep class analysis, but of course, I also have class analysis videos, so check out that playlist of mine. I do go through every single class. I try to do it in like 10 to 15 minutes and really focus only on what's the most important part of that class, at least in my opinion. Now, once I had a really strong sense of the way individual characters work, that's where I really started getting into teamwork. Now, when I was getting into teamwork, this was sort of the next phase of understanding the system, so that meant a new phase of videos to watch. For this, I really recommend the Knights of Last Call combat and tactic videos, Team Player Gaming, and then Rules Lawyer also does some good videos where he actually simulates an encounter, showing what happens when you do use teamwork and when you don't use teamwork and the drastic difference that that can have. So I would watch these videos and sort of bring these ideas to the group. And at this phase, I wasn't really thinking just about my character or the characters as individuals, but I was thinking about the party. And once I felt very comfortable with individual characters and the way that the team worked, well, then I started small, not many, but a few GM sessions. I filled in a few times when our GM couldn't make it, and then when our GM wasn't available for a few months at a time, I led a small side quest with new characters. So I guess not really a side quest, just a small, different campaign overall. And this is something I would highly recommend, is doing some GM work, but starting small. If you, within your group that you play with, if you traded 2 to 3 to maybe even as many as 5 session campaigns with each other, you are all going to learn so much about the system, which is going to make you all better players as well, and you're gonna have more fun with it. And then finally, that leads me to why I started this channel. Well, I felt like I learned a lot and I had things to share. I found some repeated points of confusion, things that just never seemed clear to people that I thought, maybe I could clarify this. I also found that through gameplay, there were some mechanics that, at least to me, seemed really good on paper, but were actually pretty bad in practice. And then vice versa, there were some that I didn't think would come up very often that ended up just being instrumental, super important feats or options. So I try to focus more on the so what and not just the what on this channel. It's more about how the rules actually affect gameplay, like is a feat too niche to ever come up, even if it sounds cool? Or is there maybe a very action-hungry character that could be good in theory, but never has enough actions to do what it needs to do? I'm looking at you, Magus, unfortunately. So that is why I started this. I thought, well, there's a lot showing you how things are done in terms of what the rules are, but I'm trying to focus a little bit more on what that actually means for you as a player. And I suppose that catches us up to where we are now. The end of almost my full first year of making these videos. I really do appreciate all the feedback and support I've received so far, especially doing these sort of community poll-based videos where I sort of let you all decide what I'll be doing next. That being said, I do have some ideas already planned for the next year. I have a new video series. I want to go and do a class tier list. I already did the class ranking, but I want to do a tier list. And of course, there will be some remastered content to cover. And one more time, thank you to everyone who has participated in the Rebel Then King community so far. If you haven't yet, it's not too late. Like, comment, subscribe, join the conversation. And until then, have a happy holidays, everyone. Have a good new year, and I hope 2024 is full of adventures.